The TrekWorks YouTube channel is sponsored by HDA ModelWorks, suppliers of scale lighting products, detail accessory parts, and complete model kits. Visit HDAModelWorks.com today.
Hello there again, everybody. Boyd here with you. Well, we're back for our little additional extra information video for the TOS Enterprise build-up. Had a lot of questions come in throughout the build series that we did a while back, and so I've gotten around here to putting some of these together. I was going to try to do a bunch of them in one episode, but I think I'm going to break them up in a couple, because what I want to do is kind of do each thing here and then allow you guys to be able to make comments on the video and maybe ask a question about what you'd like to see next. I'm working on building another one of these. This one is the older version of the kit, which is pretty cool. It has all the cool looking grid lines on this, and we're doing more detail on this one than we did the last one that you saw in the series. This one's going to actually have a detailed bridge and a detailed shuttle bay. So I'm going to take you through some steps of what I do to set those things up here with this build. When I get to that point, I'm not going to show the entire build. A lot of the same things would just be being repeated. But when I get to the areas that you guys asked some questions about, I will gladly show you those. So this first one here is going to be the most asked question that I got throughout the build series was setting up what we called this power hub. How I first laid down my wiring inside the saucer to get all my lighting going on around the window perimeters and down here in the middle and all that, and how I tie in the control board and everything. So we're going to take you through that first step, because I realized at the beginning of that original build series I had already started out with all that being done, so it was a little bit confusing to people. So we're going to start off from scratch here. You can see we got a completely bare lower saucer here. The only thing that's been done to it is I've done what I mentioned in the first video there, was shaved down all these little bracing areas and did all my cleanup on this to make it fit better. And then I've light blocked it. I used flat black first, and I've got a coat of white over the top of that. Actually a couple of coats of black and then white. And then I've got all the windows glued in using all the kit glass here, and then I've dusted over those with some just regular you know, craft acrylic paint in an airbrush, just regular white, just a real thin dusting, if you guys can see that again. And what that does is it gives me my light diffusion here, so when I light this up we don't get blindingly bright LEDs that twinkle all over the place, or we don't see any wires, you know, if we look in there. So I've done that on all the clear parts here, and that's what I do on the entire model. So what we're going to do right now, the next step I want to do is start putting in my lighting. So I've got this regular 30 gauge wrapping wire. This is what I use all the time now. I gave up on using the magnet wire quite a while ago, because the stuff is really springy, and it's you know, it's difficult to strip it. You got to use some kind of heat source to strip it or scrape it off, you know, with a hobby knife or something like this. This has got a vinyl coating on it, and it's very flexible and very small in diameter, so it's pretty much just barely bigger than magnet wire, and it'll fit in almost any kind of a area, even really small models and things like that, so it works for everything. And you don't need really heavy gauge wire to bring adequate power to all this. We're talking like milliamps of power that's required to light up these LEDs in this model, so no need to use, you know, thick wiring and all that. It helps to keep the model lighter, and it just helps to make the whole thing look a lot neater when you're done using this thinner gauge wire too. So now you can use any two colors you want for your plus and your minus. You know, on your power coming in, you've got to have a basic understanding of how DC power works. You've got a plus and a minus. Most people build these models and they run them around anywhere between 9 and 12 volts DC. I've always preferred the 9 volts because you know, your LEDs, for the most part, and LED strip, that's kind of like right in the middle of their most desirable operating range, and they'll run slightly cooler, and, you know, in effect they'll in theory, last quite a bit longer, even though there really isn't much of a worry at all about LEDs or LED strip. They'll literally run for hundreds of thousands of hours. But it does, it does make me feel better that that they'll, not generate as much heat and all that. We're putting everything into a really confined area, and I like to have the feeling of the model when it's been running for an hour or two that you can put your hand on it and you don't feel any kind of warmth or anything. And you can easily get your lights bright enough at 9 volts, throughout most of these types of models. So a 9 volt 2 amp power supply DC, one of those wall jack adapters is what I use to power these, and that's more than enough. I've got this little power supply down here that I set up everything with, and it has an indicator on here, and usually an Enterprise build like this, with everything connected, won't even draw a half of an amp. I mean, maybe 3/4 of an amp with everything going. So we're talking about a very minimal drain. But you always want to use a power supply that's rated for more than what the actual circuit is calling for. That way it's not putting a heavy load on it, and it's not breaking a sweat when it's running, and that way it will in turn last longer too. But just a little bit of basics there for people who are trying to figure this stuff out. I know, a lot of us that show this work on our YouTube channels make it sound really simple, and the people out there that are new to this, that can get really frustrating. So just drop your questions in the comments, and I'll try to get to them. And if you have anything in that area, and I can try to explain it a little bit better. But it's kind of funny, like when I started out doing this too and started doing lighting, it seemed really complicated to me too. But it's just all of a sudden you get to a point where you're working with it a little bit that just kind of a light bulb goes on. You go, what? It's not really that difficult. It's and basically once you get this principle down, it'll work on almost any kind of lighting that you want to do. It doesn't get complicated until you start getting into using some of the control boards that have multiple outputs for like multiple different things to happen, and you got to make sure you wire all those circuits up separately and everything. But for basic lighting, you'll figure it out that it's not really that difficult. But let's get started on this. So using this wrapping wire, like I talked about, you can use any 2 colors and just call them what you want. So in this case, I'm going to use my yellow wire for positive and my darker blue wire here for negative. Normally I use red and black wiring, but sometimes if it's out of stock or whatever, I get this from HDA ModelWorks. If it's out of stock, I'll just use this because as long as you keep those 2 colors straight, as far as knowing what they are and keeping it the same throughout the build, you won't have any problems. So knowing that I'm going to use my yellow for positive, I'm going to lay this in here first. Now it doesn't matter at all which one you put down first, but what I'm basically going to do here is just stretch out enough wire that it'll wrap around this sort of inner circle part of the model and kind of come around back to the area where the neck goes in right here. Just get a general idea of it. You don't want to waste wire if you don't have to, so I'm going to try to get a good idea here. And I think I'm going to go right about in there, and we'll just cut this off. Okay, and then I'm just going to start right here. I'm going to leave a little bit of the wire sticking up just like that, and I'm going to use CA glue to fasten it down. And just one little drop here right over the top of the wire. And yeah, there's been a question about, can you get away with gluing over the top of this paint like that? Well, with CA glue you can. It'll pretty much stick to it, and there's nothing that's going to be, I would never do that on a structural part, like part of the plastic part of the model that needed to be, strong. But these are just wires that are going to be laying in here, and it's just really serving the purpose of keeping them tacked down inside the model. And so it'll last forever like that. And I like to use CA because it's just really quick and easy. You can see how fast I'm going to be able to lay this down. Using slow drying glue or something, like even hot glue, it's going to take you a lot longer. You can see this is setting up instantly. So I go like every few inches, and you can see you got these little slots right here that are already cut in. So I just kind of keep it inside them. And I'll put another little drop right here. Just work our way around. You got to give it just a second or two until you can kind of see it crystallize when it hardens up using that accelerator. Okay, and we'll just keep going around here. The reason that I'm leaving a little gap between these is because we want a little bit of slack in this wire. You'll see what the purpose of that is here. It basically, what it does is it allows me to lift them up and do a little bit of stripping work on it in the center part, so I can connect more wire onto it and branch off of it. Okay. All right, and so we're getting down to where we're back around almost in a full circle here. Okay. All right. So we have our positive wire now, and you can see what the basic concept of this is. Our power is going to come into the model all the way at the very bottom, through the, up through the secondary hull, basically starting off at the base, coming up through the the mounting rod that the model sits and swivels on. The wires go up through that into the model through the secondary hull, spread out in the secondary hull to light everything there, on up into the engines. The other part of it comes up through the top of the secondary hull, up through the neck, and then up into the saucer here. So you can see we'll need 2 power wires that'll have to come up through the model, and they'll come up here, and we're just going to tie onto this so that it in turn will power up everything up on the top. So off of these 2 wires, I'm going to go ahead and lay down the negative wires now. We're just going to lay that down all in one piece right next to the yellow one that we're calling positive right now. And I'm just going to do the same thing, kind of stretch this out, get an idea of how much I need. Something like that. And we're going to go ahead and cut it off right about there. Get that out of the way. Okay, so we're going to start the same process. I'm just going to lay it down right next to the yellow wire here. Dab a CA. Go over to here. Just trying to keep my my little glue spots kind of parallel to each other along the way. All right. You can see this is literally only taken me just a few minutes to do. It goes by really quick. And we're going to end up right up here again. I made this one just a little bit too short, but that's okay. We can easily tie into that. You get the idea of what we're doing here. Again, try to be fairly accurate when you mark out your how much you need when you first unspool it like that, and maybe clip a little bit extra. But so we'll wind up with our negative wire over here. I'll just glue down this end because we're going to terminate everything over in this area anyway, so that's not a problem. Okay. All right, so you can see we've got our basic plus and minus hub that runs all the way around here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some of this LED strip and I'm going to make a little segment here for you guys. Now, these little areas right here, let's see, we'll just pick one of these. We'll just do this window group right here. So I want to cut a segment. You can see on this LED strip there's certain spots that are marked where you can cut it. You don't want to cut anywhere other than where it's indicated, because if you do, there's an internal resistor here and you'll cut it and the whole section there will no longer work. So we can either cut it here or here. In this case, I'm going to use the longer one. and cut it right there. And we're going to solder some wire onto that. Now, some of this LED strip is marked on the top, what side is what, so plus and minus. And this one happens to be that way. I can see it really in small print there that this is the plus side. So I'll make sure I solder my yellow wire onto that. I'm going to get my little helping hands here to help me out. And we'll solder this up real quick. I'm going to make sure I get my polarity right again. So we got the plus on the left-hand side. Just clamp it in our little helping hands there. Now this little soldering technique that I'm going to show you, it takes some practice. Now what you want to do is start off with a good hot solder iron. I'm running at, right now I'm set at 800 degrees on mine. And want to make sure you get the tip nice and clean and then tin it first with a little bit of solder. Just in case anybody's wondering, I'm using, let's see, this is, it says on here. This is a 60-40 mix with, you know, solder rosin in the center. And I'm not sure what the diameter of it is here. That doesn't say. Oh, diameter 0.62. That's the kind of standard size I always use for all my soldering work. And a good, you know, size roll, this will last you a long time. But to get practiced at doing this soldering on these little connections right here, you want to, like I said, get that tip tinned up, make sure the iron's really hot, and you just kind of touch it on there at the same time while the iron is touching on that terminal, and then pull it off right away. You just want to leave a small little amount of solder on there, not a huge glob. And you know, it's kind of small, so it does take a little practice. And you definitely want to make sure that after you solder it that you don't see any solder crossing in between the two, because that's a dead short. You want to make sure there's clearance in between the two of them. But you'll get better and better at that the more you practice it. So when we want to attach a wire on here again, I'm going to double check this polarity. So yeah, we're on the left hand side with our positive. I'm going to just strip a little bit of tiny little end there. Not sure how good you guys can see that. Not very much at all. And I'm not going to put any solder on that. I'm just going to lay it right on top of the solder here. And I'm just going to, at the same time, I'm going to touch that solder just to reheat it and let that, you know, the wire will just dip right down in there and the solder will kind of close up over the top of it. Stop right there and then just let it, you know, let it cool down. Always want to make sure you give it a good tug to make sure it's on there good. And you don't have a cold solder joint. And then that's pretty much it. Now we'll clip off. I usually like to leave these about 6 inches long or so. Okay, and I'm going to take my blue and go on the negative side now, repeating the same process. And you'll do this several times for how many, you know, however many strips you need to make. It's tedious work, but you want to make sure you do a good job on your soldering, because you know, bad soldering can come back to haunt you later on. So just take your time with it. Okay, we're going to clip that one the same length. All right, now we're going to put this one down right in front of this little window group right here. Peel the backing off of it. And I like to put this right up against these windows on the, you know, closest I can get where it's still flat there on the bottom. That way I get good light in there. One rule of thumb on that is that it's better to have too much lighting there instead of not enough, because you can always dim that down using diffusion here, you know, with whatever method you want to use, whether you're using the kit supplied glass, or what I like to use in here is some canopy glue or crystal clear for that. You know, you can make that go away, the brightness of it. But if it's too far away to begin with, you can't bring any more light up to that once the model's put together. So just kind of keep that in mind. All right, so what we're gonna do now, before I do anything with it, so I don't have to worry about it, I'm gonna glue it down. What I like to do is take a little drop of CA, put it on one end, one kind of going across the center of it, and one little dab over the end of it here, and kind of over the first part of the wires right there where they're attached. And what that does is kind of locks everything down, and it gives some extra support for the wires there. Not that anything's going to be pulling on them when, you know, once the model's all assembled, but, you know, just so they don't get a chance to come loose or unsolder from the connection there. So now you can see we just got to go a short distance here. And so what I'm going to do is the easiest way to strip this stuff when you're kind of in the center of it like that is just with a lighter. So you just take and go on here just like this, just for a second, get it warm. Take your, your fingernails and just pull it back. And now you got a bare spot there. And we're going to kind of match up this wire and clip it off just a little bit longer. Bare our wire here. Okay, maybe about 1/4 of an inch of it. And then we're going to have to use our tweezers here to help us a little bit. But we're just going to wrap this wire now, yellow to yellow, around this wire that I just stripped. Make sure you wrap it good and tight and all that. Okay. Sometimes you got to use the tweezers to do that. But then you go ahead and solder it. Just tin right over the top of the whole thing. Don't need a huge blob on there, just a little bit to lock it all down. And then that's complete. So you're just going to keep on doing that. We'll go ahead and do the negative one now. If you can, try to stagger them, so they're not right next to each other. Try to keep a little distance. Even though I'll show you in a second, I'm going to glue these down so they'll never get a chance to move. But in case they did, they're not going to slide into each other and short out either. So, okay, we're going to go over here now and cut this off. You'll kind of fine tune, the lengths you need, and you'll stop wasting wire. I'm wasting wire purposely here to show you guys how you'll learn it just starting out. You'll get better at judging the distances and all that, so you don't, use too much wire and waste it. But a roll of this stuff that it comes in will last you literally a couple of dozen, if not 100 models. It's a lot of wire. Okay, so on this one I'm using the tweezers to help wrap it around there and keep it nice and tight. And then we'll solder this one. As I mentioned in that build series, my habit here is I like to solder everything the minute I do it. That way I don't go back and forget and have a loose connection that might be working at the time, and then after I get the whole model put together, it comes loose, and then something major quits working in there, so I try to avoid it by doing that. Okay, so you can see we've got these two connections here. We're going to go ahead and lock these down the same way we've been doing it, just with a dab of glue on each one. Okay. And we'll put one more little dab right here. This time we'll try to get both of the wires with one drop. Just to keep everything nice and tidy and tucked away down inside there. That's mainly why you're doing all this. Make it look clean. Okay, so that's basically the whole process that you're going to repeat over and over for all this lighting here. Anything that you tie into this, like when we mount our control board here, it has the 2 power wires that come off of it. They just have to route around through these little slots right here and come up and connect right onto this. Do the same way, either connect them on the ends, depending on how much wire we have, or if we can't reach there, we come across and break in just like we did right here. So what I'm going to show you now is we're going to strip these wires. Okay. Get them bared so we can connect our power supply. I'm just running at 9 volts off my benchtop power supply here just for this test. And we'll connect up on this. Black to blue and red to yellow. And you can see we got our light on over here. And so the nice thing about this is what they call parallel wiring, which means that each component has got its own power source. We're not jumping from one to the other to the other. I've explained several times on my videos why I don't like to wire like that, because, you know, in a series is what that's called. If you have a component short out somewhere in the middle of that, or a connection come apart, everything beyond that point may not work any longer. So this way everything's got its own power source. It uses more amperage when you wire things up like this, but if you're going to run this off of a power supply, it won't matter. I mean, you're just, if you're going to run it on a battery, you may consider doing something like that because it is more efficient and a battery will last longer. But you run the risk of having that issue that I talked about where a short can cause a really, take out a whole section of the model where if you lose one little set of lights here, it's not catastrophic. So that's the basic principle of this, you guys. I hope that helped explain it to those of you who are asking questions about that. So again, just kind of going back, everything that we power up in here will connect to this same 2 wires. That's our basis for the whole thing. And then again, going back to the beginning, coming off of this, we'll have 2 wires that go down inside the ship all the way down to the base and pick up power. And it's just spread out that way through the entire model, and you just branch off of it. Okay? So like our little light that's got to go in the center here, that's going to be a 5mm white LED with a resistor on it. We'll just bring the 2 wires off of that and come up to one of these slots right here and connect maybe in this one right here or wherever we want. We can break in wherever we want. And we'll just keep branching off of that until everything is done. The control board gets power from this as well. Then I want to explain, I guess, to make that a little bit more clear too, because I do remember that being a question. The power coming into the board, right? Everything that's feeding off of that has its power from the board, not from this. So like you're just, bringing the power wires input that the power that the board needs from this hub right here. Then everything that's coming off of that, that's wired to the board, is getting power through the board. Because the board is usually controlling something like blinking lights or, effects or whatever. So think of that as 2 separate circuits, but the board is being powered up off of this hub here like everything else. And that's how you separate the 2. Okay, you don't need to run a separate circuit for that. Okay, you guys, well, I think that's going to be a wrap for this one. I'll wait and see what kind of questions come in, and if there's anything specific going forward on this. And then I'll be making specific videos about doing the shuttle bay and doing the detailed bridge on this and how I get the lighting in there and what I'm using to make all that work. The bridge is pretty much straightforward, but the shuttle bay, there's quite a few things on that as far as modifications that need to be done that I've learned that work for me over time that make it a little bit easier. If you've built this model out there, a lot of you already know this, but there's a fit issue at the back with the shuttle bay, trying to fit it in there and get the back of the ship all the way closed up. And there's some little things you can do to make that work a little bit better. And I use basically SMDs throughout the entire lighting area on the back of the shuttle bay. So I'll show you, there's some certain little spots you've got to mount those that will allow the light to fit in there when you close it all up, and still give good lighting on the sidewalls and on the ceiling. A big question that comes out is how I'm lighting that ceiling, and we'll show you how we do that. Okay, so that'll be in the next couple of videos, and then expect another video for a brand new build series here coming up real shortly of the Space 1999 Eagle, the 22-inch kit. I've started on that, and I've got some little bit of video that we're processing, and we'll have a video out on that here pretty soon. So we'll see you next time, everybody. Take care out there, and happy modeling, everyone.